Chapter 17. God is Red. Religion Today. In preceding chapters, we have made tentative comparisons between Christian doctrines and beliefs and some of the beliefs of Indian tribal groups, which appear to stand in direct opposition. The opposition is more than conceptual. It colors the manner in which non-Indians view the world and the people they deal with in that world, particularly Indians. While many Christian doctrines have now passed into the sphere of Western civilization's general beliefs, others continue to form the basis of Christian belief and determine, in large measure, the manner in which Christians understand the world and form their responses to its events. Opposing tribal concepts to Christian concepts does not mean that tribal conceptions are necessarily correct because Christianity is wrong. That Christianity is unable to speak to certain problems without facing internal collapse of its doctrinal structure means that of the possible alternative answers, one starting point must certainly be the ideas found in American Indian tribal religions. Balanced against the tribal religions, however, is that, for the most part, these religions provided for a meaningful existence for a people facing a world far different than the one presently experienced. Whether the old tribal religions can survive prolonged exposure to modern conditions is yet to be demonstrated. In our present situation, we therefore face a most difficult question of meaning. Ecologists project a world crisis of severe intensity within our lifetime, whereas religious mythologies project the end of our present existence and the eventual salvation of the chosen people and the creation of another world. It is becoming increasingly apparent that we shall not have the benefits of this world for much longer. The imminent and expected destruction of the life cycle of world ecology can be prevented by radical shift in outlook from our present naive conception of this world as a testing ground of abstract morality to a more mature view of the universe as a comprehensive matrix of life forms. Making this shift in viewpoint is essentially religious, not economic or political. The problem of contemporary people, whatever their ethnic or cultural background, lies in finding the means by which they once again pierce the veil of unreality to grasp the essential meaning of their existence. For people from a Western European background, or deeply imbued with Christian beliefs, the task is virtually impossible. The interpretation of religion has always been regarded as the exclusive property of Westerners, and the explanatory categories used in studying religious phenomena have been derived from the doctrines of the Christian religion. The minds and eyes of Western people have thus been permanently closed to understanding or observing religious experiences. Religion has become a comfortable ethic and a comforting aesthetic for Westerners, not a force of undetermined intensity and unsuspected origin that may break in on them. Many thoughtful and useful systems of belief of ancient peoples have been simply rejected a priori by Western religious thinkers. This attitude has intruded into Western science and then emerged as the intellectual criteria by which the world of our experience is judged, condemned, and too often sentenced to death. Many people, for example, have developed astrological systems by which they have charted the nature of relationships between the lives of people and the movement of the planets and stars. Given that modern science now views the universe as an extremely sophisticated electromagnetic complex, the contentions of astrologers as to the influence of the heavens on individual propensities to behave in certain ways may not be as superstitious at first appear. Yet, astrology is rejected out of hand by many followers of Western religious thinking because it conflicts with the philosophical problem of free will. For centuries, the Chinese have used and practiced acupuncture as a regular part of their religious and cultural beliefs. The idea that there might be centers of feeling within the human body that can block off pain and sensation if properly understood was virtually an anathema to many Westerners. The same situation exists today with respect to the conception of chakras, as defined by some of the Eastern religions. Apparently, such conceptions collide with Western beliefs about the human being composed of body, mind, and spirit. The Neo-Greek beliefs about the soul of man that have intruded into Christianity, or the Western conceptions of psychology and psychological problems. A number of religions have concentrated on the development of beliefs covering the spirits of places, the relationship of people to animal, bird, and reptile forms of life, and the nature of religious healing. Again, these beliefs have been rejected on dogmatic grounds, not because they were not suitable for the communities that held them as beliefs. The usual answer given to questions about the nature of religion is highly unsatisfactory. Other religions have been given credibility to the extent to which they conformed or paralleled certain Christian doctrines. To the extent to which they varied or were in direct opposition to Christian doctrines, they have been regarded as false and sometimes as deliberate attempts on the part of the Christian devil to mislead people. All of these things have been excluded from our consideration. We have been taught to consider problems using logic and concepts that ignore certain facets of existence. Religious experiences are not nearly as important to Westerners as their creeds, theologies, and speculations. All products of the intellect and not necessarily based on experiences. Regardless of the experience of a multitude of gods, monotheism has come to be regarded as the highest form of religious knowledge. Yet religions that have achieved a monotheistic doctrine are often rapidly intruded upon by a development of lesser spiritual beings, forming a pantheon. It is interesting to note that Nathan Soderblom determined that monotheism was almost always a product of the political arrangement of a society and not the natural product of religious activities or experiences. When a religion is based in experience, whether it be theological or popular, it seems to be of a polytheistic or pantheon-oriented nature. We cannot be absolutely certain that we are dealing with only one God. The fact that monotheism is logically pleasing does not mean that it is an accurate description of reality. The universe, being somewhat discontinuous in other respects, may also conceivably be discontinuous with respect to divinity. Wotan appears to have amazing resiliency. Yahweh's rainbow still shines in the sky. Ghosts prowl the British Isles. The picture of Jesus is appearing more frequently in unexpected places. And the Hopi have rain. A more basic question about people's psychological processes must be resolved before we begin to understand the breadth of the nature of religious questions. What are religious experiences? Are they of such a nature that they can only be described in terms of the Western peoples, or do they properly belong in non-Western categories? It is a fact that many societies have had definable and satisfactory relationships with some form of divinity, almost from the beginning of humankind's journey on the planet. Traditional Western thought, and more specifically traditional Christian thought, has been based on the assumption that these religions have often been cruel delusions perpetuated against primitive societies by religious leaders, shamans, and medicine people, seeking personal gain or additional powers, or people forced into trickery to preserve their place in society. We cannot conclude that other peoples spent centuries in a state of delusion simply because their experiences of God were radically different from those of Western peoples. That their experiences could not be either described accurately by Westerners or understood in Western categories of thought does not make them false. The least we can do is to understand that it is in the nature of religion to exert a profound influence within societies and groups and sustain the community or national group over a period of time. Having retreated even that much, the Western world must be prepared to analyze religion as a phenomenon that does not necessarily explain the unanswered questions posed by the philosophical mind, but that may, in itself, cause such questions to occur to all manner of people in a great variety of situations. As we find religion in the societies, there are a number of factors that appear generally to be present as preconditions to religious experiences. While religious experiences may be individual in specific events, the impact of them is generally quickly felt by respective groups so that the individualistic nature of religion is not that emphasized in Christianity but that given credence in tribal religions. That is to say, whatever else a particular experience may be, religion itself exists in specific groups and is probably more a national or tribal affair than not either an individual or universal affair. Universal ethics, however, generally do arise during the course of a religion's growth, and rules for conduct of lives and general theories of salvation seem to appear as religions become more mature. The religions that grow in these ways also lose those aspects that give religion its special importance to a society. Healing and divination powers. Many Christians will vehemently argue that the places at which religious experiences take place are of no consequence. God, they maintain, was released from the bounds of time and space with the revelation of Christianity. Thus, God is everywhere at all times, and to define divinity according to sacred or holy places is to limit his powers beyond reason, reducing him to a facade of power and intelligence. The impact of Christianity on the questions of time and space, however, was to transfer our real human and environmental problems to another world, thus sidestepping the question. The final result of this emphasis was to banish God from any possibility of relating to time and space, thus in effect precluding him from interference with this world. The major step to be taken to understand religion today is to understand the nature of religion as it occurs in specific places. There is a reason why shrines exist over and above the piety of the uneducated religious person who has visions while tending sheep. Mount Sinai, for example, has been a holy mountain for a considerable length of time, thus indicating that it has a religious existence over and above any temporary belief held by a particular people. If this concept is true, then economics cannot and should not be the sole determinant of land use, unless the sacred places are discovered and protected and used as religious places. There is no possibility of a nation ever coming to grips with the land itself. Without this basic relationship, national psychic stability is impossible. A corollary of this concept is the possibility that each land projects a particular religious spirit, which largely determines what types of religious beliefs will arise on it. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity do not radically differ about the nature of creation and the final days, when even nature is to be renewed. Arising as they did from the desert of the Near East, it may be that concern with the renewal of that particular land has performed their religious conceptions. The fact that Druidism is once again rising in parts of Europe may indicate that those lands, in largely determining the shape and beliefs of religious experiences, are Druid lands. The effort to shift religious thinking so as to examine this theory appeared ludicrous to Westerners when first proposed. We do not have any exact knowledge of what Druid religious beliefs and practices were. Whether present practitioners are precisely following ancient religious practices is less important than the fact that religion has contemporary followers who are attempting to make the proper connections with what has gone before. That religion's change is a foregone conclusion, and to go from on Jesus on the hillside advocating the message of the Beatitudes to a cotton bowl filled with Jesus freaks chanting 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits, a dollar, all those for Jesus stand up and holler, indicates that anything can occur in a religious tradition. Nearly as important may be the fact that lands can apparently be consecrated by a particular religious group wishing to place its roots in the land. The persistence of some religions on originally foreign lands would appear to testify to the fact that peoples and lands can relate to each other in a very powerful manner to develop a spiritual unity. It may be this possibility that will prove the salvation of Christianity in the modern world. Once having developed roots as did the five nations at the great tree of peace at Onondaga, the land and the religion apparently become as one. The Hopi also established themselves on a land. And rather than attempt to graft contemporary ecological concern onto basic Christian doctrines and avoid blame for the current planetary disaster, Christians would be well advised to surrender many of their doctrines and come to grips with the lands now occupied. To admit that certain lands will create divergent beliefs and practices and to change to accommodate to those realities is certainly preferable to extinction. The problem of relating to a place's spirit, or alternatively bringing a spiritual reality to a particular place, is yet to be understood in the sphere of religious thought. That a fundamental element of religion is an intimate relationship with the land on which the religion is practiced should be a major premise of future theological concern. And given a specific land on which a religion can grow, the problem then shifts to the nature of the people adhering to that religion. Is religion necessarily a universal condition for all, or is it a phenomenon that can manifest itself to different societies in different ways? The very conception of a chosen people implies a lost religious ethnicity. Most likely, religions do not in fact cross national and ethnic lines without losing their power and identity. It is probably more in the nature of things to have different groups with different religions. The traditional objection to this concept is that it would create religious wars. And if the number of important religious experiences occurring in a specific community were supported by homogeneous cultural and political factors, the religion would probably have more impact, and religious wars would not occur. At present, we have wars fought with religious justification, as well as religious wars. And the past history of the West is eloquent testimony to the fact that a universal religion crossing ethnic lines does not lessen wars. It tends to increase them until one particular ethnic group comes to dominate the religious beliefs of the whole group with its own cultural values. Besides the importance of land and religion, the existence of a specific religion among a distinct group of people is probably a fundamental element of human experience. One religion becomes specific to a group. Its nature also appears to change. being directed to the internal mechanics of the group, not to grandiose schemes of world conquest or the afterlife. And what a religion does to a group of people on a distinct land is thus a vital question for future analysis. The phenomenon that is most clearly seen among the non-Western religions is the element of healing ceremonies. It is this fact of religious life, Oral Roberts accepted, that appears to dominate land accepted, yeah. That appears to dominate land-based religions of particular peoples. One cannot separate the spiritual problems of people from their religion. Particularly, the tribal religions treat healing as a major part of religious life. Inherent in ceremonial healing practices are powers given to religious people in their visions and religious experiences. The tribal religions look at healing in an entirely different manner than do Christian religious healers. The predictable Christian religious healers build their audience to a fever pitch, hoping that supreme acts of willpower will release individuals from their infirmities. No consideration is given to the people's cultural practices or the particular spirit of the lands on which they live. In a very real way, healing is an abstract process, dependent as much on the self-motivation of the infirm as it is on the healer's powers. Tribal religions do not place as much emphasis on the infirm's rigorous willpower. Rather, specific ceremonies and healing songs and practices are used to cure specific types of sicknesses. Many Indian religious healers can tell at a glance if they can heal a particular illness. No pretense is made if it appears that the medicine cannot be used for a particular illness, and the healers do not pretend to be able to cure any sickness. The individual healer has specific powers, his or her own gifts received through his or her experiences. The counterpart of healing is a recognition of his healing power's limitations. Almost all of the healing disciplines came originally from religious beliefs and the religious leaders' practices. The severance of medicine and psychology from religion has only been a recent event in the histories of religious people. In the West, it has taken extreme forms, and the rising number of psychoanalysts, coupled with the declining number of professional clergy, testifies to the fact that the religious crisis of Western civilization is taking extreme forms of alienation within itself. The phenomenon of a substantial number of clergy suffering psychological problems indicates that religious and mental difficulties have not been solved by Christianity in any of its denominational expressions. Again, in the field of healing, relationships already seen as crucial to tribal religions are prerequisites for receiving healing powers. Healing may indeed be a means of determining the extent to which a religion is weak or strong, declining or growing. In none of the three areas, land, ethnicity, or healing, is any set of beliefs required in the traditional sense that Western thinkers have defined beliefs. The transition from traditional Western Christian categories to tribal and non-Western categories of religious experience is not, then, a matter of learning new facts about life, the world, human history, or adopting new symbols and garments. It is primarily a matter of participation in terms of the real factors of existence, living on the land, living within a specific community, and having religious people with special powers within that community. It is the non-philosophical quality of tribal religions that makes them important for this day and age. And modern society has now reached the stage at which any particular proposition is viewed as partially or relatively true, but most probably not ultimately true. Truth, in the Western scientific sense, is what can be verified. In tribal religions, no effort is made to define religion as a system of doctrinal truths about the nature of the world. It cannot, therefore, be verified, and only in a certain sense can it be experienced by a specific community. And over a long period of time, however, the cumulative experiences of the community become a truth that has been manifested for the people. The analytical error of contemporary society is that they have not understood, in religious terms, the meaning of what they have already accomplished scientifically by revealing the world of sensory perceptions. In seeking an ultimate answer to the meaning of existence, that is, in reading God's mind as early scientists described their work, modern society has foreclosed the possibility of experiencing life in favor of explaining it. Even in explaining the world, however, Western people have misunderstood it. We stand today at a series of crossroads. Rather than revolutionary movements, we may have possibly lapsed into a prolonged period of respectable boredom from which we will never recover. Clearly, the current tendency is to attempt to reclaim the 19th century roots of social existence that can give us a sense of permanency in a world of increasing change. But the disability of that era was at best a mythological memory of a golden age. Our very refusal to acknowledge the failures of both American and world history, and our patriotic effort to make it into a golden age, show how pathetic and inadequate our tools for confronting change really are. And within the traditions, beliefs, and customs of the American Indian people are the guidelines for society's future. It is this spirit of the continent of all continents that shines through the Indian anthologies and glimmers in the Indian communities in grotesque and tortured forms. The vision of stability of the community is found by non-Indians who venture into the reservations, and yet in viewing the remnants of Indian religion, they understand neither Indians nor themselves. White America and Western industrial societies have not heard the call of either the lands or the aboriginal peoples. In the appalling indices of social disorder of the tribal peoples, Westerners see only continued disruption, and, being unaccustomed to viewing life as a totality, cannot understand the persistence of the tribal peoples in preserving their communities, lands, and religions. The lands of the planet call to humankind for redemption, but it is a redemption of sanity, not a supernatural reclamation project at the end of history. The planet itself calls to the other living species for relief. Religion cannot be kept within the bounds of sermons and scriptures. It is a force in and of itself, and it calls for the integration of lands and peoples in harmonious unity. The lands wait for those who can discern their rhythms. The peculiar genius of each continent, each river valley, the rugged mountains, the placid lakes, all call for relief from the constant burden of exploitation. Who will find peace with the lands? The future of humankind lies waiting for those who will come to understand their lives and take up their responsibilities to all living things, who will listen to the trees, the animals and birds, the voices of the places of the land. As the long forgotten peoples of the respective continents rise and begin to reclaim their ancient heritage, they will discover the meaning of the lands of their ancestors. That is when the invaders of the North American continent will finally discover that for this land, God is red. End of chapter 17 and end of book.